Hey there, Bolters. My name is William Sayer. I'm the Customer Enablement Lead here at Bolt.new. And in this video is a recording of a 1-hour workshop we did with our premium customers where we do a deep dive into production databases. We basically build out a tool, which is a feature prioritization tool, and we examine all of the implications that that has in the database. There's a variety of slides in here where we go through some theory on the database, and then we also look at tools within the Supabase database, which is under the hood of the Bolt database. So we look at indexing, and then towards the end, we even go over Retrieval Augmented Generation practices. So we hope you enjoy this video, and let's get stuck in. Here we are, best practices for handling production data. So here are the slides, and then let's jump back over into the workshop outline today. Now, what I'm going to do is, this is a PRD, project requirement document, or an initial prompt that I've created that, I've built this out ahead of time. Basically, the idea is we're going to be creating an internal feature prioritization tool. So basically, anybody in a team can say a feature that they want to work on, and then everybody else in the team can sort of plot that on a graph. And the idea is that they can say, what's the effort that goes into it and what's the reward that they will get out of it. So the idea is that we all want to say we want to create this internal tool, and we want to sort of help visualize where each of these priorities lives on this XY graph. So that's basically what this PRD outlines. Now, it's quite a long one. I didn't actually manually write this all myself. What I did is I did a bit of a back and forth with Claude Opus 4.5, and I basically asked that I sort of outlined the tool that I wanted to create, and I said, this is my initial PRD that I'm thinking of. But if you have any clarifying questions, or if there's anything that you think we can improve in this initial prompt, then please do so. And so I went back maybe 2 or 3 times with Claude, and together we refined this initial prompt. And so that's how I got to what we're pasting in now. So let me just add, please build the web app using the PRD attached. Great. So what we're going to do is we're going to swap this over to Opus 4.5 just because it's quite a large project scope. Well, there's a fair amount of complicated things in there. So basically, changed it over to Opus 4.5. What we're going to do is we're just going to send this build off. So let's get that started. Now, I also want to show you guys how it'll compare if we did it in plan mode. So let's do the exact same thing. However, this one, I'm going to plan it out a little bit better. So we'll paste the same initial prompt. We're going to say, please build the web app using the PRD attached. And now, also in Opus 4.5, we're going to put this one into plan mode, and we're going to build this. And this is just basically giving you guys an idea of the difference of the plan mode compared to if I didn't use plan mode. Great. So while those are building, let's jump into the workshop. So best practice for handling production data. So you can think of basically your database as almost like an Excel document or a Google Sheets document, but it's got some superpowers attached to it. So databases are the core of your app. It's driving most of the functionalities and the data management within your Bolt app. Now, it goes beyond a simple Excel spreadsheet. We're creating a powerful tool, not just a spreadsheet. Databases include complex logic, robust security, and efficient scaling. These are all the elements that go into making a database successful. And our go-to stack, we leverage PostgreSQL, which is a powerful default combination for any Bolt project. And this is one of the most common databases used on the web today for many reasons. Okay, so what is PostgreSQL? Structured query language. It's the robust relational database. So it's a powerful open source database system renowned for exceptional reliability, feature richness, and high performance. It offers advanced data types and optimization techniques, making it an ideal, secure, and scalable foundation for sophisticated applications you'll be building. Okay, so Now, we need to understand sort of like the relational landscape between tables. So we can have it organizes your data into tables, and then there can be a relationship between each of these tables. And so understanding this is kind of important to know, basic understanding. Now we can have three different sort of relationships between tables. We can have a one-to-one relationship table. So basically, each record in one table is linked exactly to a record in another table. So an example, we've got a user table and we've got a user profile table. Each has one profile, and a user profile belongs to a user. You're probably wondering, why do we do this? Well, if we've got really private data and we kind of want to isolate that in another table, put higher security measures on that table, we can do so. And then also it helps with like database scaling. So if we don't want our table to get too large and have too much data inside of it, we can always break it off into another table and have that direct relationship. Now, I just heard a little beep, so it probably means that plan mode is done for this project. Let's go in. We'll see if it's asking us any clarifying questions. So we'll answer these and then we'll send off the builds. So one, for the average position marker reveal, should this be a distinct visual? Yes, distinct visual difference. Oops, I spelled that wrong. Let's fix this up. Now, apologies if this isn't making too much sense just yet. As soon as the project's built, you'll see exactly what this PRD has been indicating. Should users be able to remove their own placements from the matrix? Only place once, and then 2 for category tags and features. We like your preferred list back in US. Drop down. Freeform. Great. So now we'll turn that off plan mode and we'll send that build off. Now, let's come back to this. We've also got a one-to-many relationship. So a single record in one table can be associated with multiple records in another table. So an author table and a book table, for example, J.K. Rowling, and then you could have all the Harry Potter series. And finally, we have a many-to-many relationship. So this makes records in both tables. And often to indicate their relationship, we need to create a third table called a junction table. So basically think you can have students, you could have a whole variety of students, and then you could offer a variety of courses at your university or school, right? There's a lot of students and there's a lot of courses. We would make a third table called a junction table, which basically says student A is doing course X, student A is doing course Y, and then student B is doing course X, student B is doing course C. So that's an example where you would create a third table to manage this many-to-many relationship. Okay, so let's move on from here. Now, primary and foreign keys. A primary key is basically a column that uniquely identifies a record within each table. So it's unique, it never duplicates itself. It's non-null, so it always must contain a value. And the purpose, it basically guarantees that there's a very unique number associated with each of your rows in your database. Now, a foreign key is basically when you bring that primary key from another table into one of your tables that's making a relationship with that initial table. So basically, it connects data sources across different tables, and it make sure that there's a connection between the two. It can be null if need be. Okay, so I hope I haven't lost you guys too much with the slides. Let's have a look and see how our build is doing. Great. Okay, so our first build is done. Now, here's a feature prioritization tool. And notice this one did not use plan mode. So there may be some issues with it, but we'll give it our best shot. So basically, what I'm going to do is publish this tool. Now, so just to recap again, kind of like the purpose of this tool that I've just built, it's to help you can create a feature and then you can plot it on a graph. So let's open up this published version. Oh, we're having a little bit of an issue. Sometimes we get this SSL protocol error. Okay, maybe we'll publish one more time. Erica, I don't know if you've faced issues like this before.
Yeah, sometimes it can be the internet, but I'm internet that kind of blocks the bolt.host domain. But
Mhm.
I feel like you've probably had success opening these subdomains. So
Yeah, yeah. Let me try in a different
um you
browser.
yeah, you could try a different browser. Or if you want to send me that link and I can also test it.
Sure.
And maybe look at the console, DevTools console. You want to right click and inspect and
Yeah.
see if there's any errors in there. Nothing. Interesting.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Let's see how our other one's looking. Just to raise some clarity on this, guys, we had a an issue where I think it's like Xfinity, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and sometimes they help hosting with some of the Bolt.host sites, and I think they have like some sort of inbuilt like ad blocking mechanism. And sometimes that causes the browser to not actually to have this sort of protocol error when it's trying to display some of these Bolt host sites. It's a pretty infrequent error, and it's something that we're looking into. But I have a feeling that's what's happening right now.
There were some of those security errors in there. I'm wondering if fixing those
If
would
that's
allow
what's
you to.
caused it,
Don't know much
yeah,
about it,
um,
but I can check.
yeah. So just to touch on these security errors that you see, because we have created a database and we have these tables, so we've got participants and the placement of the features, etc. But we haven't actually implemented user login. That means we haven't used row level security. Basically, anybody who goes to this website is able to alter these tables. They can update it, they can delete rows, etc. So this is basically a warning just saying that our row level security policy isn't active, and that's because I purposely haven't activated user login here. So let's have another look. You know what? I'll publish this second site, and I come over here, publish, and this one was the one built with plan mode. So let's see if this is any different. Oh my goodness. Okay. So we're facing this issue again. Why don't let me jump back into a build that I practiced with yesterday, and we'll see if this is having the same issues. Hopefully not.
That is so weird. That was working yesterday, right?
Yeah, yeah. But
Um,
I
I'm,
guess, yeah, Erica, do you have any thoughts?
I don't know if the Zoom call will be affected, but you could try connecting to your hotspot.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if it affects the call,
I
but
think I've got a pretty reliable connection, but let's just have another. Yeah, return.
but if it's anything blocking Bolt.host, like your internet, then the Wi-Fi hotspot or your phone hotspot would
Mm,
remove it.
mm,
So,
yeah.
but it might affect the call.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. This is a bit of a hiccup.
You can
Um,
try incognito mode, opening up in a
yeah.
mode. Hmm. But you build Bolt.net
Yeah.
host sites all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we actually, I guess to add a bit of transparency, I think we first noticed this as an issue. It was an intermittent issue I think it was maybe last week when it first occurred, and it happened for a short period of time, and then haven't had the issue at all until literally right now. So, um, I guess what that means is maybe we can preview it just directly here. So let's join session. I think because yeah, then let's have a look at the plan one. So okay. All right, guys, what we'll do is we're just going to preview it here in the Bolt editor itself. Um, this is something that we'll need to get some clarity on. I'll speak to some of our engineers and hopefully we can make sure that this is a lot more kind of resistant to this error.
I'm
Uh,
curious, now that you're logged in, this is Bolt.hook. Can you like update the publishing? I don't know. See if you can check that URL again. I don't know if that would matter.
yeah, let's
Then,
try.
and then you can continue in this
Yeah,
preview. I doubt it'll help. Just
no, worth a shot.
no. Okay, cool.
Okay. Um, all right, so let's come back and we're going to have a quick look at basically what this has built in plan mode. So this was the version without plan mode. We had a little bit of an issue logging in. Maybe I think if we were previewing it with multiple people, then it doesn't have this issue. So this just kind of goes to show some of the benefits of building in plan mode for your initial prompt, at least. So let's create a new feature and let's say publishing user experience needs to be improved, right? We're going to post this feature. Publishing UI needs to be improved to add this feature. Okay, so let's have a look. Features. So it has added to the database, which is great. It's not showing here directly in the UI. This may be an issue because we're previewing it here in Bolt, but let's just prompt this to fix it. So I'll change over to Opus. After adding a feature, it's not showing up in the feature list. Okay. It's quite rare that from our initial prompt, we get a fully working feature or a fully working internal tool. So yeah, we'll just iterate on this a little bit.
Well, I visited the Bolt.host site for
Uh-huh.
this project, and it works for me. So I don't
Oh,
know. It
does it?
it does, yeah. So I don't know if it's your internet blocking it or maybe the update in the new Chrome that might fix
Yeah,
it. I'm not sure.
yeah. Okay. Thanks, Erica. What I'll do is I'll actually let's share in the chat. I'll share the URL if anybody wants to have a look at it. If you want to add some features, feel free. You should be able to add your name and you should be able to add a feature. And then we should all be able to see that come up on in the database itself. So maybe Erica, if you want to, oh, I just see features increased by 1. Okay. If anybody wants to add, feel free to add a feature in there. Now, basically, this is kind of a demonstration of like, say you want a tool for your company or your team or whatever it is, you can build that quite easily, literally in like the space of time that we've done here. So thank you, Chris, for adding this. So themes, great idea. So if anybody else wants to add some of their features, feel free to add it. But basically how this works is let's think, great, dark light mode by Erica. Now, what we've got here is we've got the impact on a scale, 0 at the bottom, 10 at the top. And then it looks like Bolt has kind of cropped the bottom of the interface. What we can do is let's prompt that as well. It seems like the x-axis is cropped from the bottom of the interface. Please shrink the graph a little so I can see it. Great, so we'll prompt that and then I'll publish it again. Now, for now, I'm going to show you basically how this works. So let's grab themes and, there are, some technical difficulties implementing it, but I think it does have a big impact. So personally, I'm probably going to put it around here. Now, light dark mode, that's a quick win and it does have a benefit, probably not as good as themes. So I'm going to put it there. Now we've got dev test production database by Robin, which is probably why you came to this workshop originally. We're going to say, it's a difficult implementation, but it has a big win as well. So let's put that there. Now, if you would like, feel free on your side, you can all drag these in yourself. I'll give you guys a few minutes. I'm going to publish the new UI so that we've got effort at the bottom. And I'm going to republish this. So if you guys want, feel free to refresh your page. But yeah, all feel free to put some of these features that you have just added onto the graph itself. And then we're going to do a reveal. Now, I guess the whole purpose of this is I want to demonstrate to you how the database has been created. So it's created these tables. We can look at features, we can come in here, and this is basically that primary key that we were talking about before. So this is the unique identifier. And so we can see it's this very long string of letters and numbers. So it's very unlikely to be recreated, and they're actually purposely created to be unique. And now if we want these features to be displayed in another table, let's say placements, this basically shows the feature ID and the participant ID. So this is a great example of a junction table that has used the feature's unique identification number and the participant's unique identification number. And so every time someone places a feature, it puts who placed the feature and which feature they placed, and then it shows exactly the impact that they've scored it and the effort that they've scored it as well. So this is, as I was saying, just a good example of how a junction table works in that many-to-many relationship type. Okay, I feel like we've given you time to place, so let's hit the reveal all. Wow, have a look at this. Isn't this incredible how this tool built in pretty much one prompt? So let's have a look at themes. We can see we've got a bit of a clustering, and then we've got the average, which is there in the middle. Dark mode, we've got up to the top left. We've got development, test, production, etc. So great, thanks guys. Now there's a few other things I'd like to cover. So let's move on. We've got column data types. Now, this is something that isn't necessarily revealed here in your Bolt database. So if we come back into features, we can see at the top, we've got ID, we've got title, we've got description, we've got category, we've got color. Now, we don't actually reveal what type of data they are, but it's important to know that underneath the hood, there are a variety of different data types. So if I come into Supabase, I'm just going to go to my dashboard and let's have a look at, this is a Pro Supabase account that I've connected, and you can see it's got branches. Now, if we come into some of the tables here, this is basically what is powering the Bolt database under the hood, except we kind of, we abstract some of these layers away. Now, here it actually shows in Supabase the data type that we use. And for example, we can have a date, We can have like an integer to 4 values. We can have, the unique user identifier. And here we can see an enum type. Now, basically, it's kind of good to have, we've also got a Boolean here as well, a true or false value. And now it's kind of good you don't fully in detail need to understand what these are, but it's good to understand that there are different column types under the hood. And so, for example, say we have like a text column. When we're storing that data as text, it can actually be significantly larger than something that is like a Boolean. A Boolean is like 1 byte. It's either true or it's false. It's a 0 or it's a 1. And that requires a very tiny amount of data to store. Whereas if you actually created a text column and you wrote false, there's a lot of bytes that go into basically reflecting that data itself. So how does this have an impact when it comes back to your prompting? What you can often do is you can say, especially if you've got a really large data set in your tables, you can say things like, please look through the data types in my columns and make sure that they are optimized for the data that is held within it. So, for example, like you may have roles within your company. And if you've only got 20 different roles, then you can create like an enum, which basically allows you to swap between those 20 different roles rather than using text to write each of those out. So that's good to just basically have an understanding there of these different data types. Now, let's jump into some of the security practices that we can kind of implement here using the database. So probably the most important security measure to know about is row level security. And this is kind of what we touched on before. Because we didn't have user authentication or user login, we didn't have row level security set up. But as soon as you have some sort of like auth system where a user comes and logs in, row level security basically says it uses their unique user identifier, and it basically checks if that is the same as that primary key in the table. And it says you can only like modify or read data or delete data that is in the same row as your primary key. So this is a great way to kind of secure data, make sure that users can't see other users' data. We've got database functions. So basically, a database function is a piece of code written in SQL that is stored and executed directly inside the database, and it runs right where your data lives. So a use case of this is calculations that need to be fast and are often atomic. So for example, say you want to transfer funds from account A to account B within the database, or say you're counting how many times your user performs a certain action. And every time they do that action, it wants to increment 1 to the count in the database. This is an example of a database function. Now, a good metaphor is you can think of this as like a head chef. They never leave the kitchen. They stay inside the database, and they can, chop all your data, your ingredients incredibly fast because it's all within arm's reach. Now, there's 2 ways that we can kind of evoke these. Well, there are more than 2 ways, but the 2 ways that I'm going to touch on is we've got database triggers, which can evoke these functions. And this is when, when an action fires within your database, this triggers a function to happen. So say a user generates they want to do like an API call or something, and then they want to count how many times the user has performed this action. That can basically trigger increment 1 of the count that the user has done of this certain function. So, for example, like a total vote count. Metaphor is like a smoke alarm, so it doesn't do anything until it senses smoke and then automatically springs to action. Now, another way that we can invoke these functions is we can do cron cron jobs. And these are basically time-based job scheduler that run scripts or functions at fixed intervals. So, every Friday at 5 p.m., we might generate a weekly report and email it to the product manager. Think of these as like street lights. You don't care if the cars are on the road or not, but they turn on exactly at a certain time. Cool. Now, before we carry on with that, let's jump back into our database. Now, we can also look at, policies, and this is basically where security measures are implemented. Now, I'm sure you've noticed before that when we are publishing a site, we will often do this security check. And now, because sort of, as we mentioned before, we haven't implemented row-level security, it's a big red flag to the database. And that's why it's creating all of these warnings. And so, what we've created today isn't super production ready because, if you just kept the URL very private, then it would be great and it will work fine as it may be an internal tool. But when you're thinking about like scaling to users and you've got an authentication system, that's when row level security becomes really important. And that's when the security audit can basically show all these different basically policies that you have. Now, what I want to do is I quickly want to touch on what Robin brought up here about development, test, and production data. So the way that we have sort of Supabase configured at the moment is when you prompt a change, it automatically sends that database change through to Supabase, and that happens instantly. That happens before you hit publish. So if you're changing, any of the tables in the database, so say we change the one of the columns, we change the title, the name of one of these columns, and we prompt that in the agent, then that will automatically go through to Supabase, and it will the Bolt database through Supabase, and will affect that change even before we press publish. So this basically can cause a bit of a mismatch between basically your Bolt agent, what you're building, and what is published at the end. So this is something that we're actively working on, where we're looking into basically creating a development version. If I come back into Supabase, at the moment, if I do claim my database into Supabase and we create like a development branch like so, you'll notice that this development branch actually has a different Supabase URL. So if we look at this, the first three letters is OWA. So this is the Supabase URL. That's basically what your app uses to connect to this branch or this Supabase instance. Now, if we change back to the main branch and we have a look at this URL, the first three letters is AIL. So notice that it's a completely different Supabase project effectively. So when you are in Supabase Pro and you create this branch, it creates a new project. And then when you merge those branches, it sort of brings all of the changes from one back into the other. Now, the way Bolt is configured at the moment is if you do claim a project to Supabase, so at the moment, this has the Bolt database. If we want to come and we want to claim this to Supabase, we can do it just like so. Claim it to Bolt projects. We're going to claim it. It usually takes a minute or so to load. While that's happening, if you come back in and you go into your code or your integration and you connect the Supabase and you actually change the Supabase connection in the env file to this new development branch, what happens is Bolt will kind of reset it back to the main. So we don't currently have the feature within Bolt where you can connect your Bolt project to one of these Supabase branches. The best thing that you can do is you can come back in and you can kind of do like a point in time restore of the database. So basically we can come in here. I think it's in replication or backups, and we can come into restore to a new project. So because I've got this Supabase Pro account, the first thing I had to do was claim to a Bolt database, claim to a Supabase database, and then activate Supabase Pro. And then that enables these backups, and you can sort of restore from these. So if I hit restore, it basically creates a new project, or project organization will stay the same. It will transfer the database schema, but things like edge functions and like API keys, secrets, auth settings, they won't be duplicated. So you're probably wondering, Edge Project 2, just do this. You're probably wondering, why would you want to create like a backup or something like this? And basically, the best answer at the moment is, if there are some really complex database changes that you want to make, and you definitely want to test them out on, like a new database without affecting your current users' production data, then, if you do want to test out doing something like that, the best way to do it at the moment is you can restore from a backup, which creates a new Supabase project. And then you could duplicate your Bolt project and then connect that duplication of the Bolt project to this new database. And so that's when you can do all of your testing. But where the limitation is with this is that once you're happy with the changes that you've made, is there's no easy way to kind of merge those changes back in, because you've done the changes on a new Supabase database, and then you've also done the Bolt changes in a new Bolt project. You may wonder, what if I create a Git branch of the Bolt project? Could I then make the changes in this Git branch? You can. However, it opens up sort of some vulnerabilities. So for example, say you do make the Git branch of your project. You come in here, you make a branch. So first I'll connect this repository. So feature matrix. And we're on the main branch. We're going to create a Git branch, or we'll call it dev test. Now that we're on this new branch, what you can do is you could come and you could disconnect your production Supabase database that's connected. So if we disconnect this, we can then come over into our Supabase. We've found the duplicate project. So when we've created the duplicate of the Supabase project from that backup, we can then basically connect that into this branch that we're on. And then we can make all the changes that we want. We can test and sort of see how these affect this new database duplicate. And then if we're happy with that, we can then basically, what we need to do is we need to be very careful about changing back to the original database. So that's when we'd come in and we'd need to reconnect our production database. So choose the one that we wanted. And once you connect to that, basically we can then move those changes from the dev branch into main, and it will have the Supabase migrations. And then with those Supabase migrations, you can then use those to apply the changes onto your production data. Now, this is kind of a bit of a workaround. It's a bit finicky, and there's kind of risks involved. So this is something, as I said, we're actively working on. We kind of want to make this sandbox environment as easy as possible for you guys. And so please stay tuned here, because at the moment, as I said, by duplicating the entire database and then playing around there and then having to reconnect your initial database, if you kind of get those steps a little bit mixed up along the way, then it can cause issues. And we don't want you causing issues with your production database. So yeah, stay tuned there. Now, what I'd like to do is I want to come back to some other projects that I just kind of want to show some of the benefits of, using Supabase under the hood. So what I've done is ahead of time, I've created two projects here. They're basically identical. So if we look at the database, we've got one table and it's got 2 million rows in it. Yes, that's a lot of data. So all they are is a very simple email field. And you can see I've seeded this with a whole bunch of different emails. Now, say we're going to do like an email search. If I type the letter A, notice this project hasn't used indexing. So to basically explain what indexing is think of like a book, and you go to the index, say you're reading through a book about chemistry, and you want to know about a particular molecule, rather than having to look through every single page, read through every single word to find, I don't know, hydrogen peroxide or whatever it may be. That may be indexed in the very back of the book. So you could look up hydrogen peroxide, and then it'll show you, it'll say, okay, this was referenced on page 70 and it was referenced on page 120. So using that index, it can direct you exactly where within the book this specific like word or letter or number was referenced. So this site has been built without indexing. So if I want to search through emails and I type the letter A, you'll notice it's searching. It's trying to find all of the emails starting with A, and it actually kind of timed out. Let's try it again. So I'm going to try A, probably because it's cached some of the results. It's helped it do it a little bit faster. And notice it's found 159,000 emails. It's only showing the first 50, but it's found 159,000 emails, all with the letter A in them. Now, it shows how long it took. It took just over 2 seconds to return the results. Now, what if we try B? It's searching. Okay, it took about 2 seconds as well, and it's found 94,000 matching results with B. What if we try C? Searching, 104,000 results, and it took 1.8 seconds that time. Now, the beauty of kind of Postgres SQL under the hood is that it's got these kind of inbuilt tools that you can use. And so you can simply ask your agent to implement indexing. And that's exactly what I've done for this duplicated project, where I've basically asked it, are there ways that you can speed up this search result? So here it uses indexing. And if I type A, it didn't time out that first time. And now that it's cached some of the results, have a look at that. It's come down to, a fraction of a second, about 1/10 of a second. Now, what if we try B? Yeah, 158 milliseconds, and it's still showing the same amount of matches. well, practically the same amount of matches, because when I duplicated the database, there are little inconsistencies there. But basically, this is just an example of like a tool that is inbuilt into the Bolt database, leveraging Supabase, that it can use this tool of indexing so that it can really speed up some of your results. Now, what I want to do is I'll show you another example of a tool that's kind of been inbuilt into the database that you can really leverage to help get results. Now, some of you may have heard of RAG before. It's kind of taken the, I guess, AI industry and sort of search results kind of by storm over the last few years. RAG, what does it stand for? It's Retrieval Augmented Generation. And so basically the retrieval part is basically it will look through a whole bunch of results, and then it will bring these results together, the results that match your search, and then it'll generate an answer based on the most relevant searches. Now, it's a really powerful tool. Sort of the reason why it's so powerful is it kind of understands the semantics. And it's probably might be a little confusing right now, but if I want to just give you a quick demonstration of how it works, this is an example of like a customer feedback tool that I built yesterday. And basically, say you've got some customer feedback. I'm going to say, my name is Will, and the feedback is improve the UX of publishing. So let's say one of our customers wants to basically submit this feedback. They can basically do this retrieval augmented generation process, and now they can search for similar results. And these are all these are examples of feedback that I've already created in the database. If we have a quick look, we can see we've got 17 rows of feedback. Here's some examples. I've got some random ones in here as well. So I just want to kind of show you how RAG works here. So basically we said improve the UX of publishing, and you can say it's found these 10 similar feedback items. Ali, she said improve the user interface, and that's got a 91% match. Before, I also said improve the UI. So this is kind of a 91% match. This one, the AI agent needs improvement. And because we've used the word improvement, that's probably why there's an 80% match here. Here, fix the UI kind of similar to UX. That's got an 86% match. And then as we kind of move down the list, we can see that these become more and more abstract, and that the similarity is less and less and less. Now, basically how this works under the hood is every time we submit some feedback, what it does is it basically does this thing called an embedding. And an embedding creates a string of numbers, which we can see here. And these are all kind of like, think of these as like distances on a multi-dimensional plane. May sound a little bit abstract, but basically what it uses AI, and it basically says, whatever the text is here, we're going to create a whole bunch of numbers. In this case, there's about 700 of these in this string here, and they basically reflect the semantics of what is in this text. Now, when we're doing like a RAG search, what it will do is it will, like all of these points here, basically plot the semantic meaning of this text in a multi-dimensional point in space. And when I say multi-dimensional, think of like a cube. It's got 3 dimensions. It's got X, Y, Z, and you can plot a point anywhere within that cube to kind of reveal where it is. These, instead of having 3 dimensions, it has, as I said, like 760 dimensions. And then it the database itself uses something called like a cosine similarity test. And it basically checks using this kind of interesting algorithm, like what are the closest points to the point that I just created. If I'm not explaining this feel free in your own time. You can do like a little bit of a search. It's probably a really good thing to know about what retrieval augmented generation is. You can do a quick little search with an LLM and maybe get it to explain it to you. But basically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to do a similarity search between all of these vectors. So between all of these embeddings. So inbuilt into the database itself is this, it uses something called PGVector, which is a tool, and it basically is able to very, very quickly compare all of these embeddings to one another using these numbers, and it finds which are the closest. If we come back to that cube analogy, think of what are the closest points and how are they clustered within this cube to reveal kind of the nearest neighbors. And that's exactly what happens when we're doing, like retrieval augmented generation. So let's do something like completely random. Let's say I like to watch movies, right? So now we're going to submit this. Now we're going to do another one. Say, I really enjoy watching movies. Now let's do a similarity search. When I press this, what it will do is it'll get this string, this text. It'll create that 760 dimension vector for it, and then it will compare that to everything else in the database. So let's hit search similar, and here we go. We can see that the one that we just submitted in a fraction of a second, it was really quite quick. It's found that it's got a 97% match to the feedback that we just submitted, saying I like to watch movies and I really like watching movies. Here, there's another one. Tom says I like lions, and you can see it's a little bit. It's still kind of similar. It's got 80%, but as we kind of come down the list, you can see that these become more and more abstract, and they get further and further away from what our initial feedback was here. So RAG, it's a little bit complicated, and maybe I didn't do the best job explaining it. It's a kind of complicated new kind of implementation that the industry has seen kind of come to light over the last few years. But these embeddings, these vector embeddings with all those digits have become, kind of really successful, as in LLMs have been able to accurately convey the meaning into those digits recently in the last few years. And so that has kind of what has supercharged something like RAG. Now, let's have a quick look, and I'll show you exactly. If we go to version history, you can see that we got RAG working within 6 prompts. And, there were a little bit of tweaking for the UI. I added a bit of a hybrid search, which is a little bit more complicated. But basically, RAG itself, to implement this in your Bolt project, because the agents are so powerful these days, I used Opus 4.5 to implement it. Basically, you don't need to have a full understanding of how something like this works. It's nice to. Often you can explore how it works in plan mode, but I just kind of wanted to show, some of these tools that are built into the database, such as indexing, and we've got this cosine similarity search. They're built into the database, so you can leverage those to perform something like RAG, which is super powerful. And now you can add kind of like semantic understanding to all of your searches. Okay, I think that kind of wraps us up, just about time. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Now, I hope you've enjoyed the presentation today. Do we have any questions? I know there was so much to cover there. I hope I did an all right job.
Will, where did you go? Your camera's not working.
Did I just disappear? Let me add it back.
Weird.
I'll change to my MacBook Pro camera. Brian, all right. The floor is yours.
Well, Thank you. So I just had a quick question over the break. I did explore Supabase branching
Hmm.
and I found it to be unstable from Supabase itself.
Uh-huh.
I think that you guys could actually do it simpler without the branching from Supabase.
Hmm.
Um, I think if you guys like control just as you showed and let us have a separate database and then just track the migration files that were generated since the last deployment, then we could apply those similar migrations to production because typically in dev or in test, we don't want to move the data. We want to move the schema. There are certain things, maybe there's like, I don't know, enumeration tables or something like that,
Hmm.
we might want to move data, but those would be easy enough to move with, a different way or manually if you had to. So if possible, because as the feedback has come in, it doesn't seem like Supabase is really I mean, I know they're working on it, but it doesn't seem like it's a super high priority to get branching working, and there's quite a number of issues reported just on the thread that they're tracking.
Hmm.
I feel like that you guys have the infrastructure to be able to just duplicate the database, track that you have two databases, you have a dev and a production, um, and then essentially track the migrations associated with them and then apply them, when you click publish, boom, you apply those schema migrations to the production database. And essentially, I believe if you got the connection strings right, um, while we're developing, if you got those connection strings right, and then let us, as we move from, development into production, those, however you have that shift or that transition, I really believe that that process would be more stable than relying on the Supabase branching at this point.
Hmm.
And I think that you guys could have more, like, you would be able to control that process and manipulate it if you needed to for users because all of the infrastructure would be in your control. So that's just a suggestion kind of slash thought after having explored quite extensively the Supabase branching issues that they're dealing with.
Thank you, Brian. That's actually a really good point. It kind of reminds me of something that was brought up on a call that we had in our team last week, and we were talking about those migration files and the beauty of them being non-deterministic. So, basically they once you've got all those sort of SQL migrations, you can apply them to a database and not expect any hallucinations or any problems when you're kind of creating that new database. So it's actually really interesting. I haven't heard that feedback about the Supabase branching being a little unreliable before. So it sounds like you raise a good point that in our UI, if we could come up with a really kind of simple way that the database could get duplicated, and then you're almost in this kind of dev sandbox environment where you can make those changes, test them out, and then easily bring them back into kind of your production database. It's good to know. It sounds like bringing that production data over into your development sort of test environment isn't super necessary, and that all you want to do is test out these new, I don't know, policy changes or the database schema changes, correct?
Yeah, correct. And if we did need data, right, then there are tools or mechanisms, and you guys could even create tools to be able to copy data one to one, like from either a singular table or multiple tables. I mean, that piece of it would be very trivial. The difficult piece is actually the schema. So yeah, you're correct. And by the way, I think the way that this would start in my mind is right as soon as you create a project. Well, maybe not as you create a project, but as soon as you create a Bolt database, that's the moment from that point, the very instance that you create a Bolt database, that's when you create the dev database and the production at the same time. That way, all migrations from the beginning of the project follow along one to one.
Yeah. No, thank you, Brian. And it's actually really helpful when I'm seeing, you bring this concern up here. Robbins, I see there's some feedback there. Eric was kind of mentioning this before. And it's it's when we come and when we speak to the engineers and the product people who are here at Bolt, uh, getting this feedback from you guys is really the most helpful because you're the people who are in Bolt every single day and you're the ones who are really building production applications with it. And it's become clear that this is a holdback from a variety of you. So even more reason for us to double down. And I'm going to do my best to sort of push this up the chain of command and really kind of let people know that this is what's holding back our premium users. So I really appreciate it. Um, James, I see your hand is up.
Hi, how are y'all doing? Great presentation, and I love the product.
Mm-hmm,
Yes, I was doing a lot of research as well and came up with the conclusion that I think was it Brian that just said.
mm-hmm.
I want to just understand that a little better because I might not be as technically sound as some other people on here. So the gist would be to just basically have uh, like a duplicate database, which I basically migrated in using just a terminal. Have that and then basically instead of I basically track each migration that you're doing in development, right? Track each one of them, and when you like what you see, then you apply those migrations onto your production as well to make all those changes. This way you can mess with the data in development. Is that the right approach there that he was just saying?
Yeah, from my understanding, that's the process he was outlining.
Like you'd kind of have
What
like
would,
2 or 3 separate databases tied to the same project, but one is prod, right? And one's
right,
so
right. So
interesting.
when we push to like production, then we would before we push to production, we would then relink it, or would we do that separately? How would you then relink that? Did you do that in the envelope file?
Yeah, so are you talking about with like once you've claimed to Supabase?
Let's say you're working in your development file, right? And you're using the development database that you set up, right? And you're tracking all your migrations so
Mhm.
that you ultimately want to push that to production. Then would you do that through Supabase? Just do all the migrations and then when you push to live, do you have to change like the linking in there as well on the production side?
Yeah,
I think
so
that's what Brian was saying that Bolt would facilitate that. They've got the infrastructure to facilitate that swap between I'm interacting with dev and I'm interacting with. So that would be an infrastructure change or user interface change within Bolt.
hmm hmm. Yeah, because at the moment, if you want to say you claimed a Supabase and now you've got your Supabase project linked to your project, you
Right.
can then you can disconnect that. You can connect to like your duplicate um, database.
Hmm.
And you could branch the your Bolt project, and then all of these migrations will be created in that branch. You can keep a track of kind of what those migrations are. They will change to this new connected database that you've created. Um, Once you're happy with that and you've done the testing, then what you can do is basically you'd want to merge all those changes with the migrations back into the main part of the Bolt project. But there's a point when you need to disconnect your Bolt project from this Supabase, the development Supabase, connect it back to your production database. And you'd probably want to do that first. And then you can make those Git changes. And once you bring all those migration files back into main in your Bolt project, you can then, having made note of which migration files they are, you could then ask it to make those. It'll look like it's made those migration changes in the um, project itself, but you'd need to basically say, I've reconnected a new database. Please reapply these migration files to it.
Got it. Okay, yeah. So effectively we would be doing now I have GitHub set up, right? Would I so the branching does am I setting up the branching inside Bolt where I branch off in Bolt, I then change over to my new development Supabase
Mhm.
project, right?
Mhm.
I mess around with it, try these new things. Okay, I'm ultimately happy with what I want to do. I want to get this over to production.
Mhm.
I first change back, relink my other production Supabase,
Mhm.
and then I would merge the branches back to main inside Bolt.
Yeah, yeah. So when you're merging the Git branches back within bolts,
Hmm.
you're basically saying, okay, I used to have 5 migration files and now I've got 10 migration files. And
Right.
when you merge those branches together, your main will now have those 10 migration files. However, they will not have been applied to your
Right.
production database. So
Right.
that is kind of where you need to make sure that they get applied properly. You could ask the Bolt agent. If you ask the agent itself, I think there are risks that the agent will
Right.
kind of hallucinate or cause some sort of issues. So potentially what you could do is you could get all of those migration files yourself, go into Supabase, go into the SQL editor, and basically paste those migration files, make them yourself, and then because they're now saved within the project itself, it will have context of those migrations that you've made. That's
Got it.
effectively, I think, the best way to do it at the moment. It
Mhm.
is a bit of a workaround, obviously, and it's not ideal. So I think that's where Brian kind of makes a really good point that, like, if all of that can kind of be managed in-house, then it saves doing that complex workaround, which is currently our best solution to this problem.
Right. And then to when you make your the duplicate of the database, I had to do this. I don't know if anybody else had this problem, but I had so many MD files in my project that it started to not be able to save. So
Mhm.
I moved all those internally. But when I couldn't get it to load, I went into GitHub and I got rid of all of them, and then I duplicated it using basically the terminal, and I was able to get it to move the not just the schema, but the edge functions and the indexing and everything else with a full copy.
Oh, wow.
So if you don't do that though, right, and you just do the duplicate,
Mhm.
it's also going to expect the edge functions and the indexing and all that stuff to be in there as well, right?
It at the moment, when you duplicate a project, it won't bring those server functions across. I won't
Okay.
bring secrets across. Um,
I think it just clones the table in the schema
mm,
database shape.
mm,
Yeah, that's what I did. I did a clone. That was the best. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think it would be really helpful to, for more of the people who are novices with this to have some sort of step by step with this. If I know it's not like, in your approved things yet, but it sounds like that's a very powerful way to do this.
mhm, mhm. For sure. And I think it does almost feel like the final frontier, like once we can get that sandbox environment and be really
Yeah.
secure with that production data, like once you build your project, but then you launch to customers and you want to make sure that once you've done that launch and then you're going forward, that you're keeping all their data secure and that all the changes that you're making aren't affecting what they've already put into their app or whatever it may be.
Yeah, most definitely. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks, James. Um, Anybody else? All right. Thanks, Brian. I see we've put a link in there. Cool. We'll stay posted. I'll definitely keep updating you on these workshops. We've got an office hours next week. We've actually got Quinton, who is one of our founding engineers. So he's planning to join the workshop next Tuesday. Oh, sorry, the office hours next Tuesday. So if you guys have the time, it's probably a really productive one to join, and it's probably where we can have some slightly deeper discussions on things like this and speak directly with Quinton. So thanks again. Hope you guys enjoyed the workshop.